All right, here we are, and it's a beautiful thing. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. If this is your first time listening, let me welcome you. Everyone else, what's up? I hope that you're feeling well. I am feeling particularly grateful for feeling well because earlier this week, I caught a somewhat virulent upper respiratory infection that had me completely out for the better part of 3 days. And, it's amazing. I don't get sick very often. And when you do catch like a real sickness that renders you unable to do what you would normally do, and you can just stay in bed and try to eat something and just kind of get through it, you do, generally speaking, come out on the other side at some point, right? And that's sort of an incredible thing. Like, I know I don't ever like to get sick, but that even happens, that your body takes sick and it goes through this process of addressing that or healing that, And the funny thing for me about it, and this has happened before, and I think I've even asked people about this on the show, and I've never really gotten a clear answer about it, is, how I know that I've kind of gotten on the other side of the whatever I caught that made me sick this week, is because my back pain returns. Because if I recently had this very big pain flare, and that had subsided before I got sick, but there's a certain amount of low grade back pain that I experience, and that in ways communicates it's my body. When my body tells me that I need to rest more or that I'm doing too much, like those pains that I feel in my body, they're messages for me. And it's amazing how when I was sick for 3 whole days, there was zero back pain. Like, all my usual pains go away when I was sick. And then when I was better, they returned. What is that? What is that in the body that it does that, Because if you have like a chronic pain that's, there and it just disappears for 3 days and then comes back, what does that mean? I don't know, but on some level, I find it incredible. And I'm just happy to be up to snuff enough to do a recording and bring you today's episode. And I would add that there often does seem to be other things that are playing out in terms of the timing of things and when they happen, that I got sick right at a time when I was also asking some very deep soul-searching questions inside myself that maybe I'll say something about on the other side today. And then, wow, what a week it's been. You see, I was just like having these dark nights of the soul, and then I got sick, and then a family member of mine got some very scary news about their health. In fact, they were admitted to the hospital today, and I don't want to say too much about it. Maybe I'll say something else about that on the other side today, but just here, I'm mentioning it because it just felt like a week of like very deep turning and intention setting maybe, and just kind of some sort of realignment in myself. And I don't know if that means anything to anybody else, if anybody was experiencing something like that, if maybe it's in the stars or not. Speaking of which, my guest today is Vish Chatterji. And Vish wrote a book called Astrology Decoded, The Secret Science of India's Sages. And it's about Vedic astrology and how to utilize Vedic astrology to really help you in a practical way in your life. It's not like an academic text. Those of you who are longtime listeners know, Vedic astrology has come up a few times on the show, but I think we've spoken about it in somewhat esoteric or academic terms mostly. Frankly, I don't know that my interest in it has been beyond that until recently. And as you'll hear, because I share it with Vish at the beginning of today's talk, there was like a connection between getting an email about him and some questions I've had about Vedic astrology and what makes it different from Western astrology. So it was very synchronicitous. And on top of that, as you'll hear at the very beginning, there was all of these incredible parallels and like common experiences that Vish and I have had. And I didn't expect that in a way. Usually, those of you who know, it takes some time often for me to kind of, I don't know, get somebody's vibe and warm up into trying to make a connection. You know, sometimes it can take, I don't know how long, it depends on the person, and then you can hear if you listen to the whole episode, like sometimes like halfway through, I can often like hit a groove with someone where we both relax into it. Well, you'll hear Vish and I like have kind of an immediate connection, and it almost put me in a bit of like a giddy state. So it was very fun, and I learned a few things, and it was really enjoyable to have this opportunity to speak with him. I'm very happy to be sharing it with you today. Real quick before we get to it, let me mention that if you're enjoying the show and you would like to connect with me in other ways, there's opportunities for us to do that. There's ongoing live classes and a weekly discussion group. There's on-demand continuing education videos, or maybe you would just want to dive into the full-length archives and become a supporter by getting a podcast premium subscription. You can find all of my stuff at jbrownyoga.com. Okay, y'all. I will touch base with you on the other side, but let's go ahead and get into it. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with Vish Chatterji. Hello?
Hi there.
Hi, Vish.
Hi, namaste.
Namaste. My name's Jay. Nice to meet you.
Hey, nice to meet you. I'm just setting up a microphone here.
Okay.
I'm going to switch inputs in a second. How does that sound?
Sounds pretty good to me. Does it sound okay to you?
Yeah, sounds good to me. I've got the right settings, the right gain.
Right.
I've got this,
all right.
Yeti
See,
microphone.
you know your game a little bit. I like that.
A little
Very
bit.
cool. Well, listen,
I might prop it up on a book, though. Let me do that.
Whatever you need to do. Vish, I am already recording. So I want you to consider ourselves having just begun. I don't like to do a big formal intro or anything like that in time. I like for us to just start as we just have. Is that okay?
Sounds good. I'm in. I'm ready.
Oh, very cool.
I did my yoga this morning, so that's the only prep I need for the day, right?
I hear you. I mean, a lot of what this kind of engagement, because I purposefully don't try to write out any questions in advance to send people, and I try to make it as much of a spontaneous conversation as I can, as though you and I were just meeting and going to have a cup of tea together.
That sounds good. I like that. And where are you based, Jay?
I am currently in Easton, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Which
nice.
is just on the other side of the Delaware River from New Jersey.
Oh, nice. Okay. Great.
That's about an hour and 45 minutes from New York City.
Have you spent any time in Rishikesh, Jay?
I have. What made you ask me that?
It's my favorite place to have a cup of tea with another yogi. So.
Well, you know what's so cool about that is I made a trip to India in 1998, and I went for 3 months, and I didn't go to study. I had it's too long a story, but I had already done all this yoga training here in New York, and I had sort of taken on being a yoga teacher, and then I was in grave doubts about that choice and whether or not I was really qualified to do that. And also the yoga I had been taught, I was really good at doing poses, and everybody was praising me for that. But I had all this pain and just felt like the whole reason I was doing yoga wasn't being addressed. And so I took this trip to India as a soul searching thing. I saved up my money and I went for 3 months just traveling around all over. And I ended up in Rishikesh for 2 weeks, and I met one of my most significant teachers ever there. And so when you just said, let's meet in Rishikesh and have tea, my heart welled up. It's so cool. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you making this time and us getting together like this. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, we must be brothers somehow because I also traveled in India for 3 months trying to find myself after college, and then ended up in Rishikesh for several weeks and found the teacher that became very significant in my life. And
Wow.
Rishikesh is like a second home to me. In fact, I'm going in March.
Oh, see,
And
I
of
haven't been
course,
back. I've been wanting to go back ever since, and it hasn't happened yet, but it will. It will.
what year were you in Rishikesh?
1998.
I was there in 1999.
Oh my gosh.
You
Wow,
remember
that
the
is
pizza place? Did you ever have pizza with that guy Prem?
I can't believe that you're bringing that up because one of the stories I always tell about that trip is that this teacher I met, he was kind of a rogue. He lived up in a cave a lot of the year and just came down during the raining season to teach. He had been in the Bihar school, and then he had actually been with
Yes.
Rajneesh for a while before he was
Rajesh, yeah,
Osho or
Osho.
whatever.
Yeah.
But one of the things that happened in our interaction, he didn't speak great English, but at one point in time, he kind of out of nowhere said, "Let me take you for pizza." And it was like this really significant thing because I've been traveling in. There's no pizza in
Nope.
India, as you know.
In that
And
time, no way.
the reason was he knew I was from New York, and he knew that we like ate pizza in New York.
Yes.
And it was kind of like teaching me something really important about yoga by taking me to this pizza place. And I always joke the pizza wasn't very good, but I did have the pizza in India. So it's amazing that you're bringing that up too.
There was the one place. So there was Swarg Ashram, which is the area where all the shops and, kind of shops and cafes and restaurants, and then all these babas sitting on the side of the road. And there was one tiny little cement kind of hovel almost carved out with an oven. And there was a guy there who I think his name was Prem, which means love, divine love. And he was the only pizza game in town.
Yes.
And so all the yogis, after eating ashram food, dal, chawal, sabzi, roti, every day,
The dolly plate or whatever.
the thali plate, over and over. You're like, I just want to get out. And so you go out and have pizza. And it was the most blissful experience with this guy named Prem, who means, the bliss of the divine or love of the divine. So I'm sure we're at the same pizza joint. Now there's more pizza places in Rishikesh.
I imagine. I remember where I stayed. I stayed at Om Karananda Ganga Sadan, right at the opening of Laxmanjula.
Yes, and I was next door at Yoga Nikatan Ashram, the next property over from Om Karananda. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But, Rishikesh has changed. It's become very commercial now.
Wow.
It exploded, right? Like when we were there in the late 90s, yoga wasn't really a known popular thing, especially not in the West. And so you really had the true seekers going and trying to find the original teachings. And there was a vibration in Rishikesh. There was a feeling like it's the place of the rishis. And you met these amazing beings from the Himalayas who would just appear and show up and give impart wisdom. Now it's become very commercialized. As the rafting tourism, the yoga has become a tourist thing, right? Like people pop into a hotel, take a yoga class, and say, "Oh, I went to a yoga retreat for a day," right?
Yeah.
But the underlying energy of Rishikesh is still there. If you get quiet, do
they still have the kirtan chanting in the morning and the evening via the loudspeakers along the river?
Yes, they do. That's still there. That's still preserved.
Thanks, Dee. That's one of my fondest memories. You were right. Like of all the places I traveled, and I've traveled to lots of places in the world. By far, the place that had the biggest impression on me was Rishikesh. By far.
And near Om Karananda, near that ashram, do you remember the taxi stand?
Yes.
There's a really busy place with auto rickshaws. And the moment you walk in there, these touts are like aggressively tugging at you saying, "I'll take you. Where do you want to go? Where do you go?" It's like for what should be a 20 rupee ride there, you're foreigners. So they say 500 rupees. And then you're like 500 rupees. Let me negotiate down to 200, but you're still paying, 20 times the price you're supposed to.
Yes.
So somehow in a deep meditation, I ended up in my, mind at that taxi stand. And it's become almost a pilgrimage spot for me. I don't know why, but somehow there's a vortex or something there that I feel at the taxi, crazy busy, every ripping you off taxi stand. And so that has become my special place. So I'll go to Rishikesh, and in all the beautiful saintly places you could go, I go to the center of this crazy taxi stand. And I think the reason is there's a temple next door. And in front of that temple, there's some steps to the Ganga, and it's a very, very peaceful place. And behind the steps, it says Om Karananda, the ashram you stayed at. And that's actually a place where I immersed my father's ashes in the water, because that place has such a pull. That that vortex spot near the taxi stand of Rishikesh. So any of you listening, if you make it to Rishikesh, remember, underneath all the chaos and craziness, there is a powerful energy there. And even the taxi stand, which seems so chaotic, has this powerful kind of soul adjusting energy at that place.
Well, I so appreciate that story. I fortunately was in India for a good month before I got to Rishikesh. So there was kind of like a transition that had to be made. Like time happened very differently compared to what, like waiting for trains and just learning how things worked. How like, oh, if you go to the train station, they're not going to have the ticket that you want. But if you go to the guy in town and you've got the extra money, and it was never that much money anyways, you could get the ticket that you wanted and you weren't stuck in those crazy cars in the back.
Right. That's right. That's right.
So once you I sort of relaxed and like let it take over, because that's the only time in my life where I really let life just have its own, like I went with the wind there's no other time in my adult life. Now I got kids, like you're locked in. And that one time in my life, I just let myself totally open up to what life wanted to bring me in that 3 months. And yes, it was just an incredible experience to kind of relax. And so when you talk about the chaos of the tuk-tuk stand,
yes,
I get it, because there was some kind of like incredible peace within the swirl or something. So I don't know, I could feel something the vortex idea you're talking about.
And we came to yoga around the same time. So, I've been practicing since that 1999 time. It was around March of 1999 when I went to the Himalayas and explored and then ended up in Rishikesh. And so, there's very few people now who've been practicing for that 25-year time span,
Well, okay. So let's get into it. Let's clue people into listening to this. Also, another reason why you're here, which was the primary reason, because I actually didn't know any of this that you're telling me about your time in Rishikesh and all these parallels that we have. But really, you have this book on Vedic astrology. And just for you to know, one of the reasons why I reached out to have you come on is that I can't remember when it was. It was a couple of years ago where I read this article that was like, oh, you're not actually the zodiac sign that you think you are. And it was kind of like saying how something about, we'll get into it some today, maybe, it was sort of saying something about how, the way that they originally started Western astrology was based on something that's moving. And then ultimately things have shifted and you're not the sign that you thought you were or something like that. And I remember seeing a table and it was showing, the signs. And I was like, I'm a Gemini. And it was showing I wasn't a Gemini. And some part of me reflexively was like, no, I'm a Gemini. Like that. And then I just kind of noted that. And then I did your stuff, your calculator on your chart. And, apparently I'm not a Gemini. But I guess the point I'm mentioning for everybody listening is that I have some curiosity about that, some curiosity about Vedic astrology, and also sort of like, I don't know, the way that one might utilize that in a positive way, as opposed to like the ideas of like predictions or like the ways that sometimes astrology gets cast. So for you to know, that's one of the reasons why you're here today. And for everybody listening, you've got this book. It came out not too long ago, right?
Yeah, my book is Astrology Decoded, The Secret Science of India's Sages. And it's a very, accessible entry-level book for yogis and everyday people to start to understand the Indian system, the Vedic system of astrology, which is integrated fully with the yoga system and the Ayurveda system. So, we kind of have to understand a little bit where, when you and I were exploring yoga in the late 90s, we had a spiritual interest. Like we wanted to use yoga as a method and technique to connect with our deeper soul. That's the reason we were drawn to yoga. And if you went to a yoga teacher training that was gymnastics oriented, you'd say, hey, this is just a physical thing. I want to know the spiritual thing. There's 8 limbs of yoga: yamas, niyamas, asana, pranayam, dharana, pratyahara, dharana, dhyan, samadhi. You want to do all 8 of limbs, not just the asana part, right? But today, yoga's kind of been diluted. It's become a very physical, body-focused activity. It's been asana-focused. And then Some people doing pranayama, they're calling it breath work, and they're sort of missing the whole thing. So you realize that yoga is a complex system with 8 different limbs. And then that is only within Raja Yoga, and there's 4 paths of yoga. There's Raja Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga. So there's 4 paths of yoga that also integrate. But then within the Vedic system, there's also these sister sciences. So as you go off the mat beyond your asana and you get into breathing, then you get into meditation, yamas, niyamas, lifestyle changes, then you start doing some bhakti devotional worship, then you start doing some, selfless service of karma yoga, then you start reading scripture and learning jnana yoga. You eventually come into Ayurveda and you're like, oh, there's this whole mind-body medicine system that understands your unique constitution. And based on Ayurveda, you make choices around your food, your diet, your schedule, your lifestyle. And so my first book, The Business Casual Yogi, was combining yoga and Ayurveda for everyday living, working people in the Western world. That was the concept. But the third leg of the stool is sort of missing, right? We've got yoga, we've got Ayurveda. And it turns out Vedic astrology is part and parcel the sister science to yoga and Ayurveda because it helps you understand your soul's journey. So even though you're doing yoga to connect with your soul, through Vedic astrology, you understand what is your soul trying to do this time around. In this lifetime, what is the dharma? What is the purpose? What is the higher calling of that soul? And, as a yogi coming into Vedic astrology, I was also very skeptical. When I first heard about astrology, I think I was actually going for a stroll in Rishikesh, maybe about 8-10 years ago. And a friend of mine said, oh, I went to see an astrologer. And I said, an astrologer? That sounds like you went to see a ripoff artist, or like, voodoo looking at some crystal ball, telling you about your future. And they're, who knows what they're doing. Did they try and sell you a gemstone? And, in India, a lot of times they'll say, oh, Jay, you have this very difficult energy.
Bigger money, bigger blessing. Yes.
Bigger money, bigger blessing. You give me money and I do mantra and I'll fix your problem, right? Oh, buy this gemstone for me. So I was very skeptical. And so I'd sort of ignored Vedic astrology during most of my yoga journey, right? But then along the way, I went through my Vairagya moment. I had my moment where I kind of peeked behind the matrix, and I was a corporate executive, a senior level position in a very successful tech company. And I had a moment where I realized like that just wasn't my path anymore. I had to do something, beyond money, power, title, position. I really need to come back to my yoga roots and go on a deeper spiritual journey. And I decided to go into executive coaching. So, and my approach to coaching was East meets West coaching. So, helping leaders have a more conscious approach to their leadership in the corporate world.
Can I ask you a quick question? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm kind of curious because we started out this conversation talking about these mystical journeys that we took in India, but did you kind of rebel against that? Like, what was it that made you be like, I'm going to go be in the corporate world? Was that like, I kind of could guess why that would be, but I'm curious about that choice after having those early experiences in your 20s. What was the choice to get into that first and then have to go back to it later?
Yeah. So my, I grew up in an Indian family, and I actually saw my dad practicing yoga every morning growing up. So it was part of our family tradition that you woke up in the morning, you did your yoga, you did your meditation, you did your puja, and then you went out and go forth and conquer the world, right? So I always knew that yoga was a way to stay grounded and balanced, but it wasn't going to be my full identity. I was, my family always had high aspirations for me. I went to engineering school. I came to the US on a student visa. I went to a top engineering school, worked as an engineer, went to MBA school. And so I was sort of building this career path and having a lot of success with it and earning well. And so yoga for me was just a way to stay grounded, balanced, but it wasn't my full identity. My identity was I want to be a senior leader in the corporate world. But the seed is planted, right? And, I would say even my mother was worried at one time. She's like, oh, what is this yoga thing you're doing? You're going to abandon your career, abandon your family, and go and live in the Himalayas. Like, what's happened to our son, right? So there is that fear. But, for me, it wasn't until later in life that when I sort of had the disillusionment, and I had to go through that. For my karma, I had to go through that journey of rising to the senior levels of corporate America, and then realizing for me, it was illusory, right? That wasn't real happiness, real satisfaction. So it was when I went into coaching that I thought, look, when I go to these senior leadership management trainings, everything they're teaching us to be a better leader is actually already in the yoga system. It already exists in the ancient Vedic system, because yoga is the ultimate personal development system. It's the ultimate development of the self. It makes you a super being, right? A yogi is a super being. And so can you be a yogi in the corporate world? You'll be even more successful and more grounded and make decisions that are better for society in general. That's a concept of the business casual yogi. You wear business casual clothes, but underneath you're a yogi, realizing this grounded consciousness that you bring to the world.
But you might also come to question the corporate world that you inhabit as well.
Maybe, maybe not, because, if a yogi says, you know what, I'm just going to abandon society and go do my own thing, then society remains as broken and as unconscious as it is. So we need to seed some of us into society to make the change from the inside, right?
Yeah, no, I meant in the sense that in the same way that you as a person, when you reached a place of accomplishment within that world, inside yourself felt unsatisfied or felt that wasn't a fulfilling thing. And sometimes yoga points us to deeper purposes that aren't always found in an attainment of money or power, as you were saying.
That's right. That's right. So I found that, I could give back by being a yogic counselor, a yogic coach, a yogic executive coach to people in the corporate world. And I was so intrigued with Ayurveda. And so I started using the Ayurvedic dosha quiz. And I would give that to my clients to understand, are you a pitta, vata, kapha? Are you fiery, airy, earthy kind of a person? To then suggest a lifestyle and yoga practice and food routine to make you a better leader and a more conscious leader. But, in the corporate world, you get promoted if you're a type A. So anybody who's more pitta tends to be more rewarded. So when I give the quiz to my clients, they were cheating. They would cheat on the quiz and show up as pitta fiery. And what I'm seeing before me is not a pitta fiery person. So I went to my Ayurvedic mentor, Dr. Suhas Shirsagar, one of my early mentors. I said, Dr. Suhas, my clients are cheating on the quiz. What do I do? I can see something different than what they're writing on the quiz. He said, Vish, just look at their birth chart. And I said, birth chart? Suhasji, I don't believe in that stuff. And astrology stuff, that's hocus pocus. He's like, no, look at the birth chart, but use the Vedic system, the system that's part of yoga and Ayurveda. I said, well, how's it different? And what I learned is that the Western astrology system is sort of orphaned off from any other scientific system. It's its own there's Western astrology. But Vedic astrology is not orphaned. It's part of the Vedanta system, part of Vedic system, part of the yoga system, part of the Ayurveda system. So it has this massive sort of integrated umbrella of practices that help you work with the energies. And this is where my skeptical mind was satisfied, Western astrology isn't accurate to the actual sky. So if I'm looking at a piece of paper that is your birth chart in Western astrology, and I move my eyes off of the paper and look up in the sky, they won't match. They don't match. The reality of the sky doesn't match the Western chart. But the Vedic system uses the same astronomical calculations as a NASA astronomer might. So for me, if you look at the sky and you look at a Vedic chart, they correlate. They match up. So as an engineer, I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. It's real. It's reality-based.
And, I'm sorry to interject again, but I was just having a meeting last night. I had this online teacher training, and we were discussing, the Vedic origins of yoga. And people were talking about where could such things have come from? And I was saying, as I understand it, it comes from people observing the world around them, observing their experiences. So if you were observing the sky and you were basing it solely on that, it would be accurate to what you observe. But you're saying that Western astrology is based on something that's not observable?
It's not observable. So, for instance, today, the sun moved observably from the constellation of Sagittarius into the constellation of Capricorn. That's a very significant moment. The sun actually shifted in the sky to a location where the stars of Capricorn are observable. That's why today is known as Makar Sankranti, very, very powerful day to set intentions for the new year. And it's also the day when people are taking the dip at the Mahakumbh Mela, right? The big, yoga, all the yogis have gathered to dip in the water at a certain point in time based on observable math, right? So this is when I started to realize that as a yogi, you are in pursuit of the truth. So why would you then subscribe to a system that is not truthful to the sky? So that's when I started to realize that, hey, why is it the Vedic system is sort of not in vogue, the Western astrology in vogue, but it's not even accurate to the sky? And then I started to think of my own history. India was colonized, right? So India was colonized by Western people, and we have this whole decolonization movement that was going on in the yoga world. And I started to think, hey, I think that connects to me because my ancestors had a system that made sense, and we were told our system was backwards. We were told that we learned everything from the Egyptians and the Babylonians, and that all of India's knowledge came from the outside, came from the Aryans who invaded from Central Asia. And that's like a theory that's working to this day. I'm thinking, why would we be told that we don't know anything and we had nothing to do with all our sophisticated systems? Well, that's the way you colonize a people. And so I grew up looking down on Indian systems of knowledge and looking up at Western systems of knowledge. And now, as I've gone deeper into my own studies and my own understanding, I'm realizing, wow, the original people of India, the Indus Valley civilization that resided along the Indus River at the foothills of the Himalayas, these were the original yogis. These are the people that sat in meditation for hours on end, days on end, years on end, generations on end. And in those deep states of meditation, accessed the knowledge of the universe. And that knowledge they accessed became the yoga system that we know of, the Ayurveda system we know of, the Puranas and mythology that we know of, the Vedic astrology, Jyotish system that we know of. And that whole system was a way for humans to literally become godlike in their nature, to become one with the divine. And that system remained unbroken for these 8,000-10,000 years, but subjugated along the way due to colonial forces. And so I'm realizing as a Western trained person, I can speak in a Western way, I can think in a Western way, but I can also connect to the root of my ancestry and understand this is what my ancient lineage people were doing. And so Vedic astrology to me is the most sophisticated, elegant astrology system that exists. And if you're a yogi, that's a system you should be connected to because it's about truth and observation.
Right. Okay, so beyond it just being observable as opposed to Western astrology, which is kind of crazy, actually. And I will also just add to that as a side note that in your video on your website, when you were talking about this, you use my birthday. You use June 8th, which is my birthday.
That's too funny. That's too funny.
But what I would say is I always never seemed to really feel like I was as Gemini as what Gemini was supposed to be. And I remember someone saying, you probably have a different rising sign. Someone said that to me.
Yeah.
And so in any case, when I was looking up what I am, which I guess is a Pisces, but I was like, oh, that actually seems to fit with the way I am much more anyway. So it seemed more accurate to my observable experience, to your point.
Right. So the pop culture Western astrologer, or Western astrology in pop culture form, says, hey, when were you born? Oh, I'm born June 8th. And then you kind of say, okay, this is your sign. And you get I think you're a Gemini, right? You say, I'm a Gemini. But if you actually look up the sky, the sun may not have been in Gemini at the time. It might have been in another position because the Western astrology calculation is about 23 degrees of space incorrect to the sky. So that 23 degrees is almost a full sign. So a lot of times when I'm born June 23rd, Westerners will say, oh, you're a Cancer. But the sun, that's because they're saying the sun is in the Cancer location. But if you actually do the math, the sun when I was born was actually in Gemini. So I'm a Gemini sun sign. But Gemini sun sign means that everybody born in a 30-day period, no matter where they were on planet Earth, has the same sign. In the Vedic system, we say, look, we understand this reincarnation concept, and your soul goes through these different incarnations to learn different lessons. And so in the Bhagavad Gita, it says the soul cannot be cleaved with a sword, cannot be burned by fire, cannot be wet by water, cannot be dried by wind. The soul endures through these different lifetimes. And when the soul incarnates into a being, it's connected to the universe. So whatever you see in the heavens is a reflection of the soul. So the moment Jay came into this incarnation and took his first breath, if we look at the heavens at that very moment, and the heavens change every few minutes, right? If we take a look at the heavens at that exact moment of birth, we can try to interpret what was Jay's soul thinking this time around and try to understand what is the soul journey here and why are these things happening. And of course, then based on what's happening, we can prescribe remedies. And the ultimate best remedy for any Vedic astrologer is yoga. The moment you do yoga, you're actually changing those karmic patterns. That's why yogis go through this karmic, reckoning or cleaning or cleansing, because they're changing those energies. So the energy we care about the most is when Jay was born. If you were to stand at the hospital with a telescope and look to the eastern horizon, straight dead east, we want to know what stars, what zodiac stars were on that eastern horizon, sometimes called a rising sign, because the zodiac sign that was rising. And that is good for about a 2-hour window at a very specific location on planet Earth. As you know, different places on Earth, different eastern horizon. Sun rises at a different time, depending where you are on the planet, and the sun is a different position every time, throughout the day. So eastern horizon at the moment of birth, what stars were there? And in your case, I think you said it's Pisces, right? So that means
that's what I got from your calculator.
Yeah. So that means at the moment you were born, if somebody were to look east with a telescope, they would have seen the constellation of Pisces. And, the Westerners call it a sign because it is symbolic in the Western system. But the Vedic system is real. It's not a sign. It's actual. So
okay. Now wait, stop there for a second. That's big. It's actual. And you use the word energy because that's a big leap from like a Western. We talk about this on the show a lot, like a materialist, reductionist viewpoint that views Vedic astrology as something primitive from the past that's been disproven potentially or whatever through science. So there is a sort of leap that you would have to take, or maybe you were already there because you came from that in your background, but people in the corporate world don't necessarily view life through that kind of lens necessarily. I guess it's a significant point to make that Vedic astrology is still rooted in mysticism of sorts.
Yeah. So this brings up an important point, which I would like to share with your audience. Is not a typically known teaching, but so how do I put all this together? So yes, a corporate person may not believe in all this stuff. Until they do, right? Until they have a moment of reckoning and they have a moment where their life falls apart and they try something mystical and it works. And then they're like, oh, wait, there's this whole other matrix I didn't realize, right? So most people live, you could say, in the matrix. And some of us have figured out a way to reach behind the matrix and kind of take a peek and say, oh, there's something else going on. And some of us, especially Vedic astrologers, we know how to reach behind the matrix and turn a few knobs and adjust things. And when they happen, people are like, wow, that's pretty crazy, right? Now, there was a talk. So if you're a hardcore yogi, you know that the yoga system comes from Lord Shiva, right? So yogis know that the original yogi was Shiva. And Shiva was, mythologically, is it myth? Is it reality? Is it history? We don't quite explain that. But Shiva was doing all this yoga, twisting his body, doing meditation, levitating, who knows what. And his wife, Parvati, said, what is this funny thing you're doing? What is this? You're twisting your body, doing all these things. What is this? I'm curious. And Shiva said to his wife, oh, you're curious? Okay, let me tell you. So Shiva sits down and starts describing yoga to Parvati. And that becomes the first time that yoga is revealed as he describes Parvati. And there's a text on this. It's called the Shiva Svarodaya, I think it's called. So in that text, as Shiva explains to Parvati, he also says, those people who know, they know. And the people who don't know, they don't know. And that's just the way it is. So if you know, you know. If you don't know, you don't know. So there's no proving necessary at this point, right? If you need the proof, then forget about it. So if a client comes to me and says, hey, Vish, I don't believe in Vedic astrology, prove it to me. I'll say, don't believe it. It doesn't work. It's not going to work for you. So forget about it. Move on, right? Move on. When you're ready, come back and call me, right? And when somebody's ready for it, then it really does work. It's powerful, very powerful. So I think that's the first thing to understand. But if you're not accurate to the sky, then I can't even believe it myself, right? Like, let me make it observable. So at the moment Jay was born, if I looked to the eastern horizon, there was an actual constellation of Pisces. Westerners might call it a sign, but we're saying it's not a sign, it's real. The Sanskrit word for constellation is a Rashi. So the Rashi of Pisces, Meena Rashi, was rising on the eastern horizon. Rashi means a heap of energy. So we already know it's a heap of energy. And the moment you're taking your first breath, that heap of energy is sort of, putting its rays on you in some ways, right? And what does that mean? What does Pisces mean? Well, Pisces is the most spiritual of all the signs. So people with Pisces rising, if that's, the right calculation for you, you would have a highly spiritual nature. You would feel things and you would have ways of connecting with the divine in a very expansive, broad way, more than most people, more than a Gemini for sure, right? So that's Pisces. And Pisces, as a sign or a constellation in Vedic astrology, has a planet that rules it. And the planet that rules Pisces is none other than Jupiter, which in Sanskrit is known as Guru. What does Guru mean? The one who brings light to darkness. So you will automatically, by that birth, have a guru-like nature. You will be a teacher. You'll be somebody
84%. The calculator said 84%.
84% of Jupiter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So very strong Jupiter energy. So you'll be somebody who will be drawn to teach and drawn to higher wisdom, and not in a conventional way, in a spiritual way, because Pisces is a very spiritual sign of Jupiter. So then you start to understand, okay, that's what I'm here to do. So when you have a choice between something that has to do with teaching and something that has to do with, let's say, technology, if you're Gemini, you'd be like, oh, I'm into technology. But when you know the truth, then you know sort of what your soul's destiny is. And in your case, it is really moving towards teaching, right? And are you a teacher?
I have been my whole adult life. But I came to that without knowing what my Vedic astrology chart was, just from like feeling into life and trying to listen to the signs and the symbols and the voices that help guide you when you need guidance. But I really appreciate your answer to my question about the viewpoint, because it is true that even in my own life, it's those moments where, like, I was on my knees, that you become open to, like what you said, that which is behind the matrix or whatnot.
That's right.
And then it's undeniable. Like you said, you don't need to prove it. It's true to you because you've observed it to be true through your own eyes and your own ears and heart.
Yeah. And I sometimes get asked, the title of the book was Astrology Decoded, The Secret Science of India Sages. And a lot of these things were secret, right? A lot of yoga is still secret. And somebody once asked me, if it's a secret, why are you telling everybody about it, right? So, and what should be secret? And that's the thing, there are techniques in yoga that need to be secret because they make too much power and people can't handle that power. You get siddhis, you get abilities, right, that not everyone can handle. So they have to remain sort of away from the public view, away from public discussion even, right? And they have to be taught by a qualified person and practiced by a qualified person. Same thing in Vedic astrology, right? Much of the system needs to remain secret because it exerts too much power and people can abuse it in the wrong way. But that doesn't mean you don't talk about the basics. Like if you meet somebody who has a lot of anxiety and you sit with them and they are breathing in a very shallow way, why wouldn't you teach them Dirga Pranayam? Teach them how to breathe deeply. This shouldn't be a secret. To teach somebody to breathe deeply should not be a secret. Somebody has a stiff back, teach them some asana and make their spine more flexible and give them some youth to their life. That doesn't need to be secret. Now, if you want to teach somebody the advanced techniques of how to go without food for 1 month, through Khetri Mudra and getting the Amrit from the brain, that has to remain secret. Not everyone's qualified to do those. That shouldn't be for everybody. So same thing in Vedic astrology. There are some techniques that are used to help do certain things. That doesn't need to ever, but everybody should know the basics of when were you born and what constellation, what heap of energy was influencing your life, so you kind of know your natural tendencies, so you can be more happy and comfortable in expressing your soul nature. Right?
So,
that should be for everyone.
so is You've made a few comments that.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.